Morning, members.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, members.
I'd like to open the meeting by starting with apologies for absence. I have Councillor Noah, Councillor Hobbs, Councillor Leach, Councillor Shorey. Could I invite nominations for the role of chair, please?
Move Councillor Aldridge.
Who was that? That's it.
Roger.
Councillor Aldridge will take over the role of chair.
Thank you very much. Apologies. Thank you very much, everybody, for that support. Item 3, there's an announcement if any. Item 4, appointment of 3 vice chairs for the period. The Labour Group has got nominations for Capital, which is Guy, and Roger for Bus. Have we got a nomination for Rail and Metrolink? Okay. Any others? No? Can we all support that? Thank you very much. So I'd like to welcome new members and a vote of thanks for all retiring members who served on all our committees throughout the year, and some of them for some time. Item 6. Sorry.
Can I just move a vote of thanks to Councillor Andrew Fender, who I thought was an excellent chair of this committee, and he's no longer with us, so I'd like to move a vote of thanks for him.
Can we have that seconded as well?
Yep. Seconded.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. I know we had a big send-off on the last one, didn't we? Including Kate, which I've not recovered from. I've still got heartburn from it. But yeah, it was a good send-off for him, and it served us really well. Thank you. So, item 6, membership of the GMCA for the period May to July only at the moment. Can we all move those? Okay, all agreed? Thank you very much. Item 7, terms of reference. Everybody look through the terms and reference and agree with them? Yes? Sorry.
Just a point of clarification, Chair. On the subcommittee terms of reference, it talks about only going up to July 2018, but it doesn't say that for the full committee. I just wondered whether that was an error in the papers, or whether the assumption is that these terms of reference will remain after July.
Okay, we'll just get information on that.
As far as we're aware, we will continue business as usual until the reconstitution. The terms of reference may change after that, but as yet, they stand.
Can I first apologise if I'm just nodding to everybody? Because number one, if you've been on the committee some time, I'm not very good with names to start off with. And I prefer being more informal than formal, but we've got a lot of new people here today that I don't even know the names of at all yet, so apologies for that. Okay. Item 8, terms of reference for subcommittees. Everybody okay with those? Thank you. Item 9, subcommittee appointments and substitute members for the period. Okay. Brilliant. And we've done most of them on the Labour group, apart from some of the new ones we just waited to find out. Anybody else? Yes?
Thanks, Chair. Eddie Newman from Manchester. Can you just, for those of us who are new, substitute members, are substitute members of a subcommittee, are they given all the papers the same as the full members in advance of the meeting? Are they sent them? You're nodding, so that's yes. Are you entitled to attend without a vote if the person you're substituting for is there? Are there direct individuals who substitute for an individual, or is it so many from a particular authority?
Those are some good questions. I think the first two is yes and yes. Okay, but then the substitutes we normally ask within the individual groups who would substitute for that particular committee. Okay? That's right?
Yeah.
Okay. Lynn? Warren?
In that I will be going on rail and
Yeah. Well, Councillor Holland and myself will be putting them in on part of Labour Group point of view, and we'll get the other new members information on what committees they would prefer to go on. Considering it's only for officially 2 months, or just over a month now. Okay, we'll see where we go from there. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Okay, just email Jenny and just copy it to me. Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. Item 10, programme of meetings for the period May to July. Can everybody make sure they write those meetings down? There's quite a few of them. So make sure you get them down. Okay, and do your best to attend. Everybody okay with those? Thank you very much. Item 11, terms of reference and appointment of the GMCA cycling champion. We've had one nomination from the Labour group, and that's Zidra. Has anybody else got any other nominations? She won't do it because she has to cycle. Yeah, I thought you'd had more time now you're not mayor as well, by the way. So, but okay, everybody okay with Zidra?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can we please inform Zidra then of her appointment? Okay, so moving on to the ordinary meeting. Standing items, chair's announcements, which we haven't got any at the moment. 13 declarations of interest. If you've got any, please fill in the forms and hand them to Jenny. Can we all agree minutes of last meeting? Everybody okay with those? Thank you very much. And have we any matters arising from those minutes? No? Thank you. So item 15, minutes from subcommittees. I've got 15A, Buzz Network. I can move everything apart from the ring and ride, of which I had to leave. Barry? Okay. Anybody got anything on the Buzz committee? No? Thank you. Capital and projects.
Move it. Yeah.
Move those. Anybody got anything on that? No? Thank you. Metrolink and Rail Network Subcommittee. It wasn't. You'd moved it. You did it. Yes?
Thank you, Chair. Just as a new member, I'm just keen to find out how when an emergency situation arises, so we've had a real issue with Northern Rail in recent weeks with the timetable changes, how do we ensure that Northern Rail actually are brought to account for the problems that have been experienced by passengers? Would it be normal for them to come to this meeting, to be asked to come to this meeting, or would it always be to the subcommittee that they would attend?
Okay, John?
So in the past, Councillor, they've either been regularly to subcommittee, but they've also been here as well to talk about timetable changes and that kind of thing. So it will be absolutely within the scope of the committee to have them here. As you know, the Mayor has taken quite an interest personally in trying to deal with many of the issues and has had various meetings through Rail North and now Transport for the North to try and deal with the issues, but there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't come here.
Can I just suggest then that they be invited to attend the subcommittee meeting that is coming up for the Rail and Metrolink, so that members have an opportunity to question some of the things that have been going on?
I think the chair's already decided that previously. They always attend, so you can raise things there if you're on that committee. Okay? I've got Phil.
Thanks, Chair. Just in relation to Metrolink, I know that Councillor Dickinson had a meeting sometime last year. I've raised the issue several times now in relation to the Oldham and Rochdale line. It is completely out of control. We've got serious issues there. While the operator's doing everything they can with ourselves in Rochdale. I can't speak for Oldham. We work close with the operators. We're working close with Greater Manchester Police, Enabled Policing Unit. We're still getting serious issues. No matter how much staff you put on the line, the travel safe officers, the PSSOs, they are not making a difference. This committee now needs to review, maybe looking at getting warranted police officers and specials back on the system so we can take control of the system. Only last night, one of the services on the Rochdale line got suspended for a while because we had kids throwing stones from South Chadderton at vehicles going past. Rochdale's investing £250 million in the town centre. We're encouraging businesses to come into the town, but people are afraid to get on the tram from Manchester to Rochdale and go via Oldham. It's not just Oldham's issue, it's Rochdale's as well. While we're working hard, we need a multi-agency approach and we need to get police back on the system. It's not the responsibility from the operators because they're doing everything they can. We have set a meeting up with the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor and the Assistant Chief Constable at the end of July to raise the concerns, but we need to do something now before something seriously does happen.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll definitely take that back and make sure that's on the agenda. Yes?
No, if it's okay with you, Chair, I just wanted to mention what Councillor John Leach said about the rail, just so it's clear that at the subcommittee meeting, I'm sure Councillor Dickinson will agree, the last one and the one before, Northern Rail were put under quite a lot of pressure from members of that committee because this was before the timetable change and we were not impressed with their performance. In other words, the performance had definitely dipped during this year. Officers at TFGM were well aware of the situation. But when the timetable change happened, what shocked everybody, including me, is that these timetable changes take up to 2 years of negotiation. So you would think that because Northern Rail are part of that process, they would know exactly what was coming and they'd be able to handle it. And as we all know, without going into detail, it proved to be complete and utter chaos. Passengers had the most appalling situation for many weeks. And it wasn't just in Greater Manchester, of course, it was right across the north of England. So it was a shocking situation. But because it got national attention, then naturally, no matter how important this committee or how important TFGM is, you would expect that the leaders of all the authorities in the north of England were shocked. They've all expressed their opinion. A lot of them have individually written into the Secretary of State, who has promised an inquiry on the situation and so on. But it does go beyond us, what's happened with Northern Rail. But the issue I wanted to mention more than any other thing is that when Arriva took over the franchise, we were all quite pleased because they made us a lot of promises which sounded good, including the new rolling stock which will be coming on and so on. But the fact of the matter is their performance in the last 6 months particularly, before the timetable, is just not acceptable, and we had to make that clear to them, and we did make it clear to them. But so when we do meet with them, even though we've got to obviously look at the current situation, which is important, I cannot believe that we can have any operator running the railways in the manner they've been running them for 6 months, not just for a few weeks. The issue of franchising is now coming up, and we know elsewhere in the country exactly the same performance, that some of the private operators are just not delivering the goods when it comes to the franchises. So we want that whole issue looked at, and I know, to be fair to Andy Burnham, the GM Mayor, he's raised this issue both directly with the Secretary of State as well as obviously elsewhere. So I think we've got to support that move to try and get the government to look again at the franchise situation.
Just to support what Phil and his comments, and you know, in terms of what we need to do on the Oldham line, it is it's not helpful, and I'm conscious some of the publicity around it hasn't been helpful either, because actually some serious crime has been mixed up with the usual, I say usual, it's the wrong word, but the usual antisocial behaviour, and it's that sort of perfect storm that's actually driving people off the network, and particularly people who travel on their own, and particularly women. although, that's the people who speak to me about it. So I do think, having a look at it, that we need to get it back under control and might need to put something in place. And then, we might get to a point where we can ease off a bit, but we do need to get hold of it during the summer. And I'm not being funny, but we need to get hold of it before the school holidays start in 5 weeks' time, because my fear is it'll be worse then. And you're right, there's a lot of investment going on, and we need people to come out of Manchester to Oldham and Rochdale, as much as we need people to go from Rochdale and Oldham into Manchester for leisure and other things. So I'll be very interested in, and we had a very helpful meeting about the ASB that the Doreen chaired some time ago, and I just wonder whether we just need to do a little bit more, and whether the cops in particular need to be a bit more flexible on how they treat some of this, because I'm not convinced how they're dealing with it helps us. And I'll leave it at that, I think. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to pass it over. I know Doreen and Lynn's been working on this for quite a while as well, but I think it would be helpful if some of the members, if you've heard of individual cases, that you share that then with the chair and the vice chair, so they're aware of it when they're speaking to officers about it, as well as reporting it direct to officers. Okay, Howard. Cheers for that, Doreen.
Yeah, it's only to, I concur with all that Roger said about Northern Rail, and yes, they do come to the committee each meeting, and we will certainly be grilling them. But you also need to bring Network Rail into this, because they're so behind with the performance. It isn't just Northern. No. The performance is terrible. I'm not defending it, but it's also Northern Rail. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else got any comments on that? No? Lovely debate, thank you. Item 16, Register of Key Decisions. Members are asked to note. Everybody happy with those? Okay, thank you. Item 17, Policy, Priorities and Political Engagement. Anybody got any questions on them? Warren?
I'd like to move an amendment, Chair, to, on page 67, at 2.3, the last sentence to read, to enable economic success to spread to all areas, transport needs to be accessible, affordable and reliable for all residents.
That amendment's been put forward. Yeah.
Can I suggest a further amendment? Oh, sorry, do we need to vote on that amendment first? Okay. I just wanted to suggest a further amendment, because we discussed the removal of that final clause in our group meeting, and that was largely because it could be understood as this organisation seeing car use as the default mode of transport. And we know that that's not what we're here for. And so just to back that change up, what I'd like to suggest adding into those descriptors of accessible, affordable and reliable, frequent. As I was saying earlier, it's great to have a reliable bus service, but if it's not frequent enough to get you to work when you need to be there, then it's not much use to you. And then also, if we're going to be encouraging modal shift and persuading people out of their cars, then I think some notion of modernity or comfort, some kind of the level of service that you will get on your local bus. It will be frequent, it will be reliable, it will be accessible and affordable, but it will also be a pleasant journey to work or shopping, wherever you're going.
Right. Yes, please. It's only to say, I know we don't know where we're going with the committee, and we don't know who will be on it. But the point is that we all have busy lives, and if we're going to go to any conferences this year, I need to know if I'm going or not going, so that I can put it in my diary, because I've got kids and things, and like I say, we're all busy. But these things can't be kept held in abeyance. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Guy?
Yeah, I've been asked, it's a factual thing, not an amendment. I've been asked by the Brighton Licensed Vehicles Association to express the the thanks to the committee that it was Roger that put it rather than
I made a big impression.
Okay, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I make one observation that when you look, and I know this is one of Noel's hobby horses from Bury, that when you look at some of the vehicles, some of the buses that are travelling around, certainly from First, and some of the operators, some of those buses are very dilapidated, and I would question whether or not they're not responsible for significant obnoxious fumes being emitted from those vehicles, and it's about time that we perhaps started to get somebody to focus their minds on providing vehicles with a more modern diesel engine or a combination of a hybrid. That is the sort of situation that we really need to pursue, because it's not very nice to be stood on a street corner when you're next to a bus, even at a bus stop, where it's spewing out large volumes of nitrous oxide and other gases.
Cheers for that, David. Simon?
It was just to pick up on the comments, Chair, that were made around amendments, and I think the points that are made are certainly very valid. The paragraph that's here just repeats text that is within the 2040 strategy. However, we are producing an annual progress report on the 2040 strategy that we'll bring to members a little later in the summer, so we could use that as the opportunity to emphasise those points in particular.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions on this item. First of all, I'm keen to know how our political engagement work fits in with the engagement work being done by the Mayor and the Mayor's office, and how that can work sort of hand in glove, and try and avoid any sort of duplication of work that's going on. But I'm also keen to have a bit more information about exactly what political engagement work is being done. I understand the stuff in terms of party conference. Most of us will go to party conferences, so we see the work that's being done. But I have to confess, I mean, I don't know what POLIS is, and I don't know what the other organisation. I can't remember what it's called now, POLIS and EMTA, and I've no idea what work we're actually doing in Europe and further afield in terms of political engagement, and it'd be good to have a bit more detail about how effective that sort of political engagement work is, and what value for money we're getting from the budget that we're spending on political engagement.
For a comment, John. I'll just bring Robin in before I bring Simon back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on 2.3, we'd like to support the amendment, particularly, in fact, as we've always had the emphasis, in fact, of encouraging people not to use their cars and to go on transport. So there are many people who have cars that we would like to use public transport. So on that basis, we're very supportive of the amendment.
Certainly, Chair. So firstly, to stress that there's very, very close working between the TFGM team and the Mayor's office, and so we're very comfortable and confident that we are fully joined up in the approaches that we take around political engagement, and we can ensure that we continue to give members that confidence through the year. With regard to the various international networks that we work with, they allow us to explore and develop areas of transport policy at shared cost across a number of city regions, and that gives us the opportunity both to learn from the experience of good comparator cities and also do that in a very cost-effective manner. And if members would find it useful, I'd be happy for us to arrange to bring back a summary of the range of policy areas that we're working on through those forums.
Thanks, Chair. Just to amplify that a little bit, so the Mayor went to the European Metropolitan Transport Authorities last week and signed with 20 other cities across Europe for decarbonisation of transport, which reflects the earlier point around buses, as an example. In terms of Polis, which is 70 cities across Europe, Manchester is hosting the annual conference of Polis towards the end of November this year, so we'll have around about 500 to 600 people from across Europe coming here. So there is certainly a value in it, and it certainly raises the profile of Manchester, and it's consistent with that sort of the Greater Manchester strategy of being a world-class city region, and we're playing our part in it in transport.
Well, in terms of lobbying, it's a bit like the old saw, in terms of value for money, John, it's like the old saw about advertising. Half the budget's wasted, but you don't know which half it is. So I think political...
Okay, thank you very much for that. So that document, what you're saying, has already been quoted for in these minutes. Can we please make sure and make clear the views of the committee, the amendments we'd like to be made to that policy? Is that okay? Thank you. Have you got that down, or would you... Warren, are you all right dropping it off afterwards? Okay. Okay, if you just speak to Jenny as well for those two. Okay, is everybody in agreement of those? Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to item 18, Metrolink zonal fares. Okay, has anybody got any comments on that? Howard?
Just a brief comment, Chair, and I just want to be clear that I think this simplification is welcome, but as always, the devil's in the detail. For me, one of the things, and I'll make no apologies for being parochial, I think it's wrong that the Sean Crompton stop that is in Oldham Borough is in a different zone than the rest of Oldham. And if that were corrected, I'd be a very happy camper, as would the people who use that stop. Because with the greatest respect to Phil and his colleagues, it has got to be wrong. It is dearer to get to Oldham and Manchester than it is to get to Rochdale from Shaw. It should be the same price, and it would be if it was in the same zone. So I made them comments in the consultation. My local district executive has made those comments, as have some other people. But the principle is fine. There is some details, but that would be one that I'd wish to flag up at this stage, that it gives all the wrong messages out, and won't make that much difference. But it also makes it more expensive, because we have a significant number of people who come to the Sean Crompton Transfer who work in the 3 distribution companies. There's over 2,000 employees, and we've spent a lot of time doing green transport plans, and equally keeping that in a different zone than the rest of the borough makes it expensive for all them people, and I don't see why that should be the case. So I'd hope, Chair, we can make representations that be in the same zone as the rest of the borough is, and with that I'd be very happy, subject to any other minor details, to support it.
Okay, thanks for that, Howard. Eddie?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, on the front page, it says there's a presentation today. Obviously, there isn't, but that's why I was expecting a presentation, and then we'd be discussing matters. I thought I'd have to move because there'd be something on the wall behind. But anyway, there you go. So there isn't a presentation, so I'd like an explanation because that's on the agenda. I think the public engagement exercise has been very, very poor. I travel on the tram quite often, and the average tram passenger doesn't know about, or certainly hasn't been impressed on them about this consultation. And the consultation is finishing in 2 days' time. I mean, this is just nonsense. This is just outrageous, actually. And it looks as though, it's all been signed, sealed and delivered. I am in favour, probably like most of us, of zonal fares. They make a lot of sense. We see it on other transport authorities, and I suspect that one of the main reasons for this is because smart ticketing won't work under the present system, and it will work in the future under zonal. So that would be good as well. But the detail, we need to know. This committee, if it's got any value, needs to have a fuller report. It would be nice to have a presentation. We need to have an opportunity to be able to comment, or the relevant subcommittee, in time while the consultation is still going on. There needs to be a fuller report available, which I understand has gone to some other people, but not to members of this committee. And we need to see lots of examples of what. Let's have 50 examples. We're talking about a large area here of, from station A to station B, what is the current fare and what would it be under these proposals. And finally, I represent Woodhouse Park as a councillor in Wythenshawe, which includes the airport and the residential areas immediately to the north. And my constituents, if they wanted to travel to Chorlton, or if Chorlton people wanted to travel to the airport or to Wythenshawe, and quite a lot of people from Chorlton work in Wythenshawe, and other people go the other way around, going through 3 zones, and yet if they want to travel from the airport or Wythenshawe, say to Eccles, which is a lot further than Chorlton, according to this, they'd also be going through 3 zones, same price. And I suspect at the moment there's some difference in the fare between those 2 examples, and yet they'd be the same, and presumably an increase significantly. So there are lots of low-income people. It's all very well saying there'll be winners and losers, we understand that, but there will be many people who are low income, who actually don't have any alternative. I'm not advocating people should use a car. I've got a car and I came in by tram this morning. So, but there are many people who don't have that alternative, which we're trying to discourage them from using anyway, of private transport, who are on low incomes, and they may well face a significant increase. And I think we need to look at all that kind of thing properly before all this is railroaded through. Thank you.
Before I bring any more questions in, I can only apologise. I should have brought Stephen in first, actually, to talk about his presentation. So, Stephen, on this point, your apologies.
Thank you, Chair. I think we were a bit unsure whether a presentation was necessarily the right approach or not, but very happy here today as the director responsible for this. Both myself and the gentleman sat next to me, Gareth Turner, is our head of fares and ticketing, probably a new face to many of you as well. So we're very much here to help answer the questions. I mean, this is a really timely meeting in the sense of it does fit in that public engagement period and feed into that. And so, for example, we're very well aware of the issue that's been raised about Shaw and Crompton. And a number of other issues that have perhaps inevitably come to light, because when you do propose something such as this and you're replacing a system that's developed on quite an incremental basis over a long period of time as the lines have developed, perhaps inevitably you're going to have different ways of doing it, different proposals. Interestingly, just picking up Shaw and Crompton, and I know there's various diagrams with your report, but what we're actually doing here is evolving the current system. We're trying to avoid as many anomalies as possible, rather than completely starting from a blank sheet of paper. So although it's very different, and it's about simplifying, making more convenient the access and charging for the network, we have actually evolved it from, it's in your pack as Appendix 2, with 18 areas and ringed concentric circles, and actually that's the one that currently shows Shaw and Crompton linked in with Rochdale. I'm not trying to defend that, but I think that's the background as to why it is. We haven't moved it across, but this is all good information for us to gather at this point. And consider, and just to confirm, we've absolutely got the message about Shaw and Crompton, and we'll be considering that after the period closes. I think just sort of picking up the more general comment about the public engagement, what we've been trying to do is that, in a limited period of time now, over the last few weeks, having been developing these proposals over the last few months, we have really tried and are really trying to make sure that we do engage properly. As of this morning, there's just over 4,000 responses to the survey that we've put out. We've done a lot of other media attention to try and, basically say, fill the survey form in, particularly via both social media and our website. And part of that has been to promote the existence of the survey with stops on the Metrolink, posters on the Metrolink stops. So we want to make sure it's a really meaningful exercise, and having got that 4,000 surveys, which isn't just a tick box exercise, it's got quite a lot of free form text in it for people to put forward suggestions as well, and we've had quite a lot of that. So, there's a lot of information for us to gather next week after the survey period closes, and to consider quite carefully. I think generally the principle seems to have been welcomed so far, both perhaps in the room but also in terms of some of the sentiment that we've had back. But the devil is in the detail, and we've got to really make sure we get it right, both in the way that we implement the scheme, if that's to be the way forward, and also in terms of things such as the zone boundaries. We absolutely know we've got to get that right, and that's why we're trying really hard to make sure that we get people's views over that period of time. It's really important to us, so I can only confirm that. And perhaps I'm trying to reassure Councillor Newman particularly that we want that. And from this point of view, the timing of this meeting is really helpful because we can take all of those comments into account, Chair.
I'm sure there'll be many more, yeah. Robin?
Thank you, Chair. Adjust my comments to the same points, really, in relation to 3.7 and 4.2. And first of all, say that we're certainly in favour of any minimisation of a structure that moves from 8,500 down to 10. We're a bit concerned, in fact, that there's a huge drop there. I mean, we're not talking about a handful, and I'd just like a bit more of an explanation as to how that's actually been handled, because there's such a big drop from, as I say, from the 8,500 down to 10. I agree with most of what Councillor Newman has said. In fact, I'm not going to repeat it because I think he made some very valued points there. There are clearly, as he says, winners and losers. I'd just like to know a little bit more about the losers. What sort of percentage increase are the losers going to face? And I think that would be helpful to know that. And I think without repeating everything that's already been said, I think that probably covers our points. But we broadly welcome the changes, but we just need to know a little bit more about the losers, perhaps, rather than just the winners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Noel.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Similar to Councillor Sykes, we have a what's been described as an anomaly in Bury as well, so we are moving ahead with that, and I'm sure other people from other boroughs have got similar issues. But really, it was similar to the point Councillor Newman's made about a lack of advertising, which is lamentable. But something as big as this, although I welcome this, and it does need to be done, and I understand the reasons why it's taken so long to do it, but this is a big project, and unfortunately I think a 2-week consultation isn't long enough. Speaking to people in Bury, very few people seem to know about this, so although 4,000 seems like a significant figure, compared to the kind of numbers that use the Metrolink, and we have got the second busiest line on the network in Bury, 4,000 across the network doesn't seem like a large number of people. So I think really, I think Metrolink stroke TFGM need to do better when they do a consultation exercise such as this one in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I've got Doreen.
Thank you, Chairman. Smart ticketing has been around as long as I've been on this committee. This, and I know it's GMCA, so it's not a decision, it is just for information. But I just wondered why it's come now. It has been discussed in the past quite a few times, and we've not really taken it on board. So why now? Thank you.
I've got Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also concerned about the timescale of this, and likewise, a lot of people don't know it. But I'm trying to understand Appendix 2. Perhaps somebody could explain it to me. It's absolute. I'm trying to work out. It doesn't seem to make a lot of logic in that sense. I live in Stretford and use the Metrolink, and that's always had some sort of zonal there. And I was obviously thought as they would expand it, the zones would expand outwards. But trying to work out what those sort of circles are, I heard the brief explanation earlier, but it still didn't mean an awful lot to me in that sense. And the report itself, and when I speak to people outside, they sort of just shrug their shoulders. So I think, it's that it is not. haven't got a clue what it actually means in that sense of it. So I mean, how the general public out there are going to perceive it. I think the figures of 4,000, I'm not sure they can tell us how many people use Metrolink on a daily basis, but I think 4,000 is probably a very tiny drop in that sense of it. So I'm not sure at the end of this consultation will actually be very meaningful in that sense of it. So I think I do have concerns about the way this has suddenly appeared and being rushed through, which obviously at some point they'd need to review it, but what's the sudden rush in doing this now at this point? Surely it could have been discussed and given advance notice when the consultation would start and given plenty of publicity, and it could be done over a much longer period. I think this is very short, very fast, and I don't understand why that is, and I think it may not, we may get a lot more complaints following it once it comes in and people say they were not aware of it.
Okay, I've got John and Angelica, and then I'm just going to move back over then to Stephen for some of those replies. Okay, John?
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat anything that's already been said before. I just want to start by two very positive things. First of all, I think the decision to make stops on the boundary of two zones using the lowest price for whatever the journey is, if it involves one of those stops, is a good thing. So I think that we should welcome that strongly. And secondly, I wanted to say thank you to officers. I should have said this earlier in the meeting. They've bent over backwards to respond to numerous emails that I've sent since joining this committee to try and answer some questions that I've had. But slightly negative point, I have asked for some explanation in relation to the zoning system and how it's come about and how it's evolving. And although I got a very detailed response, I have to say I still have no idea why certain stops are in certain zones. To me, it seems very strange that bits of Didsbury are in Zone 3, but Eccles is in Zone 2, yet the Trafford Centre is going to be in Zone 3. And I think we ought to get a report at some point that makes it very clear how this zoning system has been arrived at, because there doesn't seem to be any obvious real reason why such and such a stop is in one zone or another.
Angelique?
Thank you, Chair. A very quick question around the consultation response. Can you, with regards to other consultations that you have been running as TFGM, is the level of response similar to this, or have you had other consultations where you had more response? So just something to compare the response with, really. And then the other question, somewhere on the paper says that these fares will be applied in January 2019. Can you take us through, so on the back of this consultation, what is going to happen next? Because I can understand there is a sense from some members to extend the consultation to elicit a higher response, but how is that going to impact in terms of implementing the whole thing? Thanks.
Okay. Can you remember all those?
Thank you. Yes, my page is full of notes, and I think what we'll do is we'll share some of the responses between Gareth here and myself. Just picking up and link, I think a couple of them are linked in terms of the why now from Councillor Dickinson and related comments is there is if you like, an opportunity to do this early next year, the January factor, and that's really about trying to be clear and transparent, if you like, with people out there, with customers. So what will be happening anyway in the background is that the second of the 3 years of increased fares for Metrolink that were approved by the combined authority and were discussed by the committee. The first of those 3 years happened in January this year. Then in January next year, there's already a pre-agreed fare increase, and there'll be one more year as well. So without going too much over that for now, we also need to sort of factor in the fact there will be a need to put up fares, and that was pre-agreed what that would be. So that's happening. There was, I think more positively, if you like, we are really getting on with the SMART initiative that was referred to by councillors with contactless ticketing and at least a simple approach to what's called daily capping like you do in London. We're moving that forward really quickly. And what we'd like to try to do, as far as possible, is to make changes in one go and bring things together. That's the opportunity I'm referring to, because if we're not careful, we'll end up doing something at one stage and then doing something else to change it again. And I'm really worried that we'll send out a confusing message as a result. It doesn't mean we have to do it now. Going back to some of the comments about smart, it's an opportunity, but I think it's a one that would be wrong of me not to explain to members that if we can possibly get these things to be brought together so that it's a simple message for customers, then we should try to do that, really. And that's really the sort of point about the why now. The winners and losers comment, I had a bit of a wry smile, because you probably imagine I wouldn't personally use the expression winners or losers, but I anticipate and expect the fact that some people will benefit more than others. So because the line and the network has developed over time with different charging bases, so some lines are far more expensive or far cheaper than other lines. In trying to put in an approach that's fair and is simple and is consistent across the different lines, that means that some lines benefit more than others and conversely others don't. And we've been trying to be quite transparent with people about that. So, for example, the Berry line as a line benefits less, if you like. I'll let Gareth pick up in a few moments about any specifics there about particular stops, but we do recognise that the rate of change is different by line, and that's inevitable in trying to standardise the approach that we've got, which is all part of simplifying it ultimately. But there's a step to take really to get over that point. Appendix 2, I will let Gareth explain, but effectively, Appendix 2 is not how we currently publicise fares. It is just so difficult with over 8,500 fares for each product type, such as an adult return and so on. We can't actually clearly demonstrate what the fares would be, and we think that's not right. So part of this in going to 10 is to have a very simple fare set that is understandable, not just for existing customers, but of course to attract more people from both those that live locally and beyond to be able to use the system, because you'd expect, I think, a tram metro system to be very easy to understand in terms of the cost base behind it. So perhaps the other one I'll just pick up and then hand over to Gareth on one or two. The zone charging system, and there's a comment in the report about this. The proposed zones are not just developed based on distance, although distance is obviously a key factor that's inbuilt into that. There is this bit of history that's still in there, so that we don't get some real bumps along the way. We haven't started with a blank sheet of paper. We've tried to evolve it by simplifying the underlying fare structure that's there. But we've also built in some factors such as, well, actually, how attractive different lines are in terms of journey speed, for example. So some of the lines are slower, they're more on street than other lines, just by their very nature. And we've tried to take that into account in saying where we think the zone boundaries should be. So that's another example of a factor that we've tried to build in. So without making it too complex, hopefully, there's a number of factors, not just pure distance, in what we're proposing with the existing boundaries. I'll have a look at my notes and listen to Gareth answer one or two more in the meantime.
Hello everybody. To go into a bit more detail, Councillor Garrido, on your point, so the way that we have achieved simplification from 8,500 fares to 10 fares, the current number of fares are based on all of the stop-to-stop combinations across the network. We have 93 operational stops on the current network, so 93 times 92 gives you all of the stop-to-stop fare combinations, the information ultimately that we would have to share with customers for them to know what the price of tickets that they're purchasing are. We moved to 10 zonal combinations, so there are 4 single zone combinations, 3 2 zone combinations, 2 3 zone combinations and 1 all zone combination. So in terms of sharing information with customers, transparently giving them the information they need to know what every single journey across the network costs them, we end up with a position where we have to share 10 fares per product. In terms of losers and winners, one of the challenges we recognised, and certainly in my correspondence with Councillor Leach, this was apparent, is decoupling the GMCA approved fare increase for January 2019, which is RPI plus 1 plus 1.3%, with the zonal proposal. So if the zonal proposal doesn't go ahead, in January 2019 we will be implementing a fare increase of RPI plus 1 plus 1.3%. Current estimate is that would be a fare increase of about 5.4%. So when we've assessed the number of winners and losers from this proposal, we've done it in comparison with that 5.4% increase, so a like-for-like comparison. When we run that assessment, we find that 84% of fares are no worse or better than they would have been without the zonal proposal, and 16% of fares are worse than they would have been. Those 16% primarily are the shortest journeys across the network. The reason for that is twofold. One, that we're proposing to harmonise the fares within the city zone, so within Manchester city centre, with all of the other single zone fares across the network. That means that proportionally they have by far and away the largest fare increase of around 25%. Secondly, because those fares are low and because we're restricted to increments of 20 pence, and that's because of the operations of the ticket vending machines, they only accept 10 pence coins as the lowest denomination. Therefore, the adult fares have to increase in increments of 20 pence for the child and concessionary fares to increase in increments of 10 pence. Therefore, a 20 pence increase on a short fare and a low fare is proportionately high. So those fares are about 10% increase on average. We have got this assessment. We can share that information with people individually or across the board if you would like. I would also say that I have personally, with Stephen and with another of our colleagues, Steve Warrener, met with all of the individual district leaders. And in those meetings we extended the offer that we would visit districts again to either speak to officers or members to share more detail of the proposal with them.
I just wanted to check with you, Gareth, if that, when you met the leaders, I know Wigan for point of view, we haven't got Metrolink, but it does affect our passengers that are coming in. So have you still spoke to...
So we met with Lord Peter Smith and with David Molyneux in Wigan. Yeah.
Thank you. So realistically, what it's telling us, I'll bring you back in a second. In reality, I think we need to come back here after the consultation just to say what passengers are saying and or think about it while we've gone out for this 2 weeks. And to give us a more in-depth detail, I mean, what you've just told us there was just absolutely brilliant, to be honest, at the explanation. But I think all members, I know you've been bringing it through your committees on point of view, but I think we need a presentation properly in front of us all on what the changes are connected with the consultation. Is that okay?
I was just trying to tick off whether I thought between us we'd responded, and we certainly haven't responded on the comment or question rather about the number of people that have responded to the engagement survey compared to other surveys.
Okay.
As I said, we're over 4,000. I anticipate, unless anything particularly spectacular happens over the weekend, we'll end at about 4,500. I haven't got the absolute numbers in front of me, but in terms of recent engagement exercises, and they're not quite the same as a formal consultation, they're an attempt to make sure we do engage and get input, which is what we're doing now. So the most recent one was the congestion deal, as it's now become, which was roundly 7,000 responses. And I was just checking with Simon here about the 2040 strategy recently, and I've forgotten what you said was roundly the numbers.
About 8,000.
About 8,000. Clearly this is a more specific, targeted and direct initiative, and as I said earlier on, we're really still making all efforts we possibly can to make sure we get that number bumped up as far as possible. I think otherwise, I hope members feel we've actually responded to the points that were raised.
They just want to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I thank Gareth for his response? I thought it was very detailed and very easy to understand, so thank you for that. So much so that I think that would be useful if you can actually put what you said in an email to all members, because I think that information is very helpful. Can I just pick up on the point? I wasn't going to pick up on anything else, but Stephen, you just mentioned about congestion deal. Can you just remind me what that's about?
So our strategy director may want to comment as well, but most recently there was an engagement around the congestion plan that the Mayor has been developing recently, and I say recently, but over the last few months, probably around 6 months, something of that sort, and that did involve a listening and engagement exercise. And that's now been concluded, if you like, and brought together as a congestion deal with public and private sector, and published as a plan. And clearly from our organisation's perspective, there's a lot of initiatives there that were built into our business plan for this year, right across it. You know, it impacts obviously something like congestion, cuts across all modes, and certainly plenty there, for example, for Bob here in terms of our control and operations function to be doing in terms of improving how we monitor and intervene on the network. So it is a separate issue, but these things do overlap, and what we want to try and do with the zonal fares is make it easier for new people to access the network as well as retain our existing customers, and therefore help to reduce congestion on the highways. So that's the link.
Okay, I've got Noel first.
Again, thank you, Chair. One of the things that hasn't been explained, and I'm sure some kind of algorithm and some kind of cost analysis went into basically prescribing these zones, but what's not been explained is why there's 4 zones. If, for example, there were 3 zones, then I'm sure that would work better for a lot of people. I accept that people generally expect to pay a bit more if they live in outlying areas, but some of the outlying areas, Wythenshawe, for example, where I was brought up, and Radcliffe, where I've also lived for some time, just as examples that I'm aware of, aren't necessarily the most affluent areas in Greater Manchester. So I don't think people should be penalised for living relatively distant to the city centre. So I think it's probably a bit too late in the day, but what is the actual reason for there being 4 zones rather than, for example, 3?
Okay, Guy?
Sorry. Councillor Bailey. I think this is an opportunity to explain Appendix 2 as well, which we missed earlier, which I'm mindful of. So the current proposal is an iteration and a simplification of the current fare structure. So the reason that we've taken that approach is it best allows us to deliver the customer benefits which are set out in the report, whilst also managing the impact of the proposal on revenue and on demand. So you'll all be aware that we have overcrowding issues on certain lines. So we need to understand what the impact of the proposal is on people's travel behaviour in order to manage the impact on the operations of the network. Because of that, there are currently effectively 4 price bands on the network, which are grouped into those localised zones which are contained within Appendix 2. Those zones have been constructed over time as the network has expanded incrementally, and as Stephen mentioned earlier, the factors that have been taken into account are largely distance and journey speed, journey time based, but also they've been responded to as we've introduced each line on local lobby. So issues like Councillor Sykes' issue about Shore and Crompton, we've had those discussions with districts, and we've amended the charging zones accordingly to take into account those issues. We end up with that with a 4-zone structure. If you look at other places that zonal structures have been implemented, there is a further simplification in a lot of those areas. Now, I'm not saying here that that is what will happen, but it's important to recognise that this is an incremental journey. TFGM would like to take an incremental approach to the improvement of fares and ticketing, which really delivers customer benefits. And so this is the most effective way we feel of implementing a zonal fare structure, achieving those benefits primarily of flexibility and simplicity over time. So hopefully that answers your questions, Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, when I explain to people, when I tell people that 84% of the fares are either the same or lower, the more intelligent of my listeners will say that could be 83% the same and 1% lower, or 1% the same and 83% lower. Now, those two are very, very different equations in terms of people's perception, so that needs to be disaggregated.
In my email to you all, I'll disaggregate it, but it is largely better than, rather than the same as. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else got any more comments on that? No? Smashing. Thank you very much. And you're okay coming back to the next meeting with a presentation. Okay? Thank you. Before I move to the exclusion of the press and public, I've just got one other item, which is on the as a director of Manchester Accessible Transport Limited, GMCA, we need another name replacement for Councillor Fender, who will no longer be on there. So currently who's on is Councillor Dickinson, Councillor Jones, myself, Councillor Holland, So we just need one more. Have we any nominations, please? Okay. Okay. We all agreement on John?
Yeah.
Smashing. Thank you very much. Short and sweet. So, sorry, yes, John?
Before we go into Part B, can I just ask a question about why the two items are actually in Part B? In the interest of transparency, I appreciate that the financial consequences of the Part B item has to be in Part B. But I don't understand why the drawings, for instance, for the two disposals and the information about exactly what's being proposed, excluding the financial information, couldn't actually be in Part A, so it's available to the public.
We'll definitely look at that to see whether there's anything that can be moved over. We've done it on bus quite a bit as well, so we'll make sure that we look into that for future. Okay, John. Yep, so can we move item 19, which is exclusion of the press and public? Thank you.